Well, thank you, everybody, for being here this evening. And thank you so much to Bob for being here and Jean for being here. And we are really looking forward to hearing from you this evening, Bob, about so many things. And I wanted to start by asking you about your philosophy of collecting, because I know it's very considered and thoughtful, and I think it has guided so much of how you and Jean have approached what you do.
I warn you, Halona, that regardless of what your question is, like a politician, I'm going to answer what I want. But
I love it. I don't think anybody minds.
But I will answer your question, really. But before I do this, and I know Catherine have pointed out some thank yous to people, but I would like to take a moment to give my own personal thank you to the persons who have been instrumental in making this result happen. So I have to go and thank the Catherines, the Catherine with the K, who was my first contact on the curatorial staff when 30 Americans was here. And that really sort of started my relationship with the university. And then the Catherine with the C came along and came and visited our art storage in Maryland and wiped us out. And Catherine, and we realized that we overlapped at the University of Maryland where you were doing your work, but we didn't get a chance to meet there. But you have been a wonderful colleague, over the years and since. I also want to take the time, in terms of mounting exhibitions, they are not cheap. And I want to give a shout out to Ian and Meta Lynn, who were in the audience, who really sort of made that really sort of happen. And I also want to express my appreciation for two community groups. Catherine, you did mention Akima and Popolo and the work that they have done. But there has been another group that was not officially a part of this exhibition, but her enthusiasm and her support and her network. Sisters Empowering Hawaii, under the leadership of Sharon Yarborough. I tell you, Sharon, it has been such a wonderful delight working with you around this exhibition. Not only in terms of your physical and official work, but you, through your network, was able to have Jean gave us the opportunity to host at our home some wonderful shakers and movers here in this community. And I will always be thankful and grateful for what you have done. Thank you. I will get to your question, but I got to recognize my love and my apartment and my partner for over 57 years of marriage and 50 years of collecting African American art, Jean Steele. Well, now I have to answer your question. There have been three guiding principles of what Jean and I have tried to do over the years. The first one is this: one cannot fully understand the nature or the canon of American art unless they recognize and understand the contributions that African American artists have made to the art field. And hopefully at the end of our time together, hopefully we can highlight some ways in which African American artists and African American master printers have pushed and developed and have made unique contributions to the field of art. The second principle that have guided our collecting over the years, and it is captured in the phrase that Catherine used: representation matters. In the art field, at the level of the board, at the level of the staff, the curatorial staff, it is very important to have representation at all of these various levels. Lastly, the third principle that's related to our sort of collecting. When I started this journey over 50 years ago, I came to the realization that personnel is policy. Who is making the decisions about what exhibition would be shown? Who would make the decision about what art is really sort of connected? It depends on the personnel. And the reason why I personally wanted to highlight Catherine with the K and Catherine with the C, because if they did not have an appreciation of this work, this exhibition would never happen. So, what we have been about is trying to train and support that next generation of persons so that when we tell the complete story of African American art, the representation of all social and economic groups would be reflected in our institutions. So it has been those three principles that have informed our work. I shouldn't call it work because it's been a labor of love, over the years.
Do you feel like when you and Jean set out on your collecting journey that you were this conscious of these three different elements? Or is it that over time you sort of reflect and see that that is part of the driving force of what you're doing?
It kind of evolved over time, because early on, the first couple of years, we were somewhat eclectic, and we always collected what we liked. But bringing in my academic training, one of the things, the legacy from that is that if you really want to make a statement or master area, one have to really sort of focus and localized. So I would say after 10 years of collecting randomly, we decided that we were going to really focus on works on paper, really and master that area, and then do collecting over time.
I was wondering if you could share the story of how you started collecting together, because and the reason I say that, let me just say, is that I feel that when all of us go and see the Steele collection, it just is so incredible. And it's hard to imagine how any one person could start to enter into the field of collecting what they're passionate about, supporting the artists in their midst that they feel drawn to. And I think that you and Jean have an experience that sort of shows you just have to start, and you just have to follow your passion, and you have to follow your ideas, and then, you know, these 50 years later, look at what has come from that. So I just was hoping you could speak a little bit to the beginning of it.
I would really sort of love to do that. You know, the nature of exhibitions and what's on the wall of museums are very important. For me, my engagement started over 60 years ago when I was a freshman at Morehouse College. I had a job working in the library, the Travel and Net Library. And on my breaks, I would go to the library, and I would go and look at things that were on the walls. And what these artists had created was intriguing. I grew up in Pritchard, Alabama. I had never gone to, well, in fact, museums were segregated, so we couldn't have gone even if I had the desire to go. So I was really, really impressed. So for 2 years, I would go on my breaks and look at the stuff. I was an English major and a sociology minor at Morehouse. My junior and senior year, my roommate was English, but an art historian in art history. And his name was Barry Gaither. Barry said, "Bob, you know what you were looking at were all of the prize winners at the Atlanta University collection, because in the 1920s, 40s, and 30s, African American artists, there were nobody that could be shown. So Harold Woodruff, when he started the art program at Spelman College, convinced them to provide a national forum for African American artists. So he informed me that what I had looked at for 2 years were Romare Bearden, Jacob Lawrence, Faith Ringgold, and all of the major players. So that was really sort of, my really sort of start. Barry went on to get his degree at Brown University in American Art History. And he was the first African American curator at the Museum of Boston. And he decided the Museum of Art Boston had the first satellite community based in Roxbury African American community. And Barry was the director and built that sort of collection. So we have stayed in touch over the years. I came to the University of Maryland in 1975. David Driscoll came to the university as chair of the art department in 1977. And Barry said, "Look, Barry, Barry, that David is here, get to know David," which I did. And that started my relationship with David over the years. And eventually, I became the director of that center. So that's my story. Okay.
Tell us a little bit more about your relationship and connection with David Driscoll.
Well, in 1977, when David joined the faculty at University of Maryland College Park, up until that time, there were 12 African American faculty. David was number 13. So out of a faculty of 3,500. So the African American faculty, we would meet in each other's homes monthly for moral support and dealing with all of the stress, in terms of that sort of situation. So by that time, Gene and I were fairly along in terms of our sort of collecting. So David saw what we had really, so we had done, and David in turn hired Sam Gilliam on the faculty, Margot Humphrey on the faculty, Stephanie Poe. So by being in that sort of situation, I got a chance to interact and work with, and of course, we sort of collect those over time. So after David decided to eventually retire, the University of Maryland decided to create the David C. Driscoll Center in David's honor. So when part of the year-long celebration of the center, they wanted to feature a collection of African American art. David, artist himself, major art historian, major curator, and a major collector. So they wanted to feature a collector as a part of David's, legacy. So they did a preliminary search to try to figure out who they were going to feature. And the director of the art gallery at that time, as he had done his preliminary work, the word had gotten back that, well, you want a collection of African American art. Well, Dr. Steele over in the psychology department has a collection. And that's the way that, unfolded, and that way that happened. So after colleagues and fellow colleagues and well, Catherine really sort of mentioned the idea that I made the mistake to let David, the dean, and the president know that I was going to retire. The deal was Jean was going to retire first, and she was going to shake it out for a year, and then I was going to sort of retire. The first director of the center did not work out. So they asked me if I would really sort of do it for 1 or 2 years to try to get things going. But that ended up being, I thought it was 10, but Gene informed me that it was 8 years as the director. So that's the way David and I really started our relationship as colleagues, collecting, and eventually.
So you talked a little bit about, getting that first sort of inspiration and connection to art through your time as an undergraduate.
Mm-hmm.
And then you skip forward to when you and Jean already had a collection.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm wondering about the period in between when you worked together to form the collection and how that worked.
Well, once we decided that this is that we were going to, one of the recommendations that going back to Barry Gaither again, and by that time just beginning to start reading, it became very clear that we had to really get a focus. We really had to really get focused. And the focus then was works on paper. And then we decided that we wanted to anchor our collecting around Jacob Lawrence and Romeo Beard. So those were the first two major pieces. And then one of the strategies that we developed over time was to focus in on an artist and then collect them over time through the various sort of phases. And then we decided that, then we went to Faith Ring Gold, and then we just laid it out a couple. But another thing that really sort of happened, and this is one of the things that I was very appreciative of what the Catherines did with this particular exhibition. What they decided to focus on is the workshops and the institutions that focused on had as their mission or as a part of their work focus on African American art. And over time, I was invited to be on the board of those various organizations. So that really sort of helped us, to focus.
Yeah. So we are so lucky here to have you on our board as part of our board of trustees. And you bring so much wisdom and kindness and generosity of spirit to your work here on the board. And I just was hoping you could talk a little bit about what your hope is for HoMA going forward and what you're actively working to see us do.
Representation and personnel is policy. Every board that I have been on, I try to take representation very serious. When I joined the Yale Art Gallery Board almost 23 years ago, my goal was, I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to focus on adding to Yale's collection what is known in the field as mid-career artists and emerging artists. And I said, I just naively assumed that my Yale colleague was very much aware of Romeo Beard and Jacob Lawrence and all of this. And to my surprise, when I mentioned those names, people looked at me as if I was from Mars. So I had to change my whole intervention strategy. By the time I joined the board, the National Gallery did that major retrospective of Romeo Bearden's work. And that was the first introduction at that level. I thought Jean and I had decided that we would channel Yale University's Art Gallery Board was started by John Trumbull, gave Yale 100 pieces to start that collection. So I thought Jean and I decided that we were going to give Yale 100 pieces, to start African American art. But then she informed me that that was my idea, not her idea. But we were able to really sort of to do this. So my hope for HoMA, I would love to see us work toward a permanent collection that really represents the various social economic groups, ethnic groups in Hawaii that are not currently represented in the collection. I really, I mentioned the idea that personnel is policy, right? Every board that I try to see how we can begin to train that next generation. provide an internship program for high school students, maybe college students, maybe, so that the the docent staff, our internship program, really sort of look like what Hawaii looked like. Yeah, so those are the kinds of things that I would really sort of be interested in doing as a board. Yes.
You know, you said earlier that whatever I asked, you were going to answer as you wanted to.
Yeah.
So I also just wanted to give you the opportunity to raise some topics that you want to talk about, things that you want to explore here.
One of the things, and it goes back, working with Akima, and certainly, as well as, working with Sharon. And there's a link chapter here, there's an NACP chapter. And one of the things that's been so exhilarating and encouraging for me, to see the ethnic profile of who are coming to us, is changing, and really very much would be, be a part of doing that. Yeah. Up until this year, really, and I appreciate the opportunity to be on the board here. Most of my work, in the field, it's been on the East Coast with institutions, the Driscoll Center, Yale, et cetera. But my mission over the next couple of years to really get to know the artists and get to know the community here, and see what ways we can build the kinds of relationships, with these various organizations, and so that's my hope and that's my vision.
That's so great.
Yeah.
We really appreciate you.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about what you have discovered in sort of the journey of collecting and the greatest joy that you have experienced in the journey of collecting.
I think the artist, I don't even know how many various artists that we have in our collection. Some of the artists we have collected were dead by the time I collected that work. But from HoMA, Jake, David, Faith Ringo, name them, most, I would say 90% of those artists I was able to establish a relationship with, over time. So just really getting to know the artist, trying to understand that really sort of stuff. And the discretionary resources, that Gina and I was having, we help, with catalogs, we help with, purchasing. And so to me, I come to this whole approach as a clinical oriented psychology, and that is building institutions, building relationships. One of the things I'm really sort of amazed that a lot of the artists here that I've gotten to know, a lot of them don't know one another. So just to really, so to build a really sort of a structure of artists and the structure of collectors. One of the things that we were able to do in the Washington area is establish a collectors club. You know, as a board member of the National Black Art Festival, we started the Collectors Guild, where we as the collectors organized and get to know one another and see what we can do, you know, jointly, institutionally. And I would like to do something similar to that here.
We would love that.
Mm-hmm.
So we are coming close to the time when we want to open it up for questions. But before that, is there anything else that you wanted to talk about, touch upon?
No, I think most of the things are. Well, just let me. Could I just check my? Let me check my list. Yeah, I think I got most of it. Okay.
Good. I think we can go ahead and open it up for questions then.
Most of the prints that you're displaying show a plethora of bold colors and inattention to detail. And I'm wondering if you feel that's somewhat reflective of either Afro-American roots or the American experience, or where you feel that comes from.
I think we've always been, I guess, if one see my collection or come to our house, bold primary colors are very much, it's just sort of, really sort of a part of it. But that's one thing. But I tell you, one of my collecting mentors was Duncan Phillips in the Phillips collection in Washington, D.C. If you go to that collection, Duncan Phillips was proud of really sort of bold primary colors and stuff. So, but Gene, you want to respond to that? Yeah. So, yeah. I don't know that the thing that really sort of one of the artists that I have sort of collected over time is Margot Humphrey, and Margot says that color is life, color is really sort of energy. So that I think that's part of it. One thing, I guess that is one thing on my cheat sheet, is that in terms of selecting a piece, right? Or just sort of collecting sort of in general. There are 5 factors that I consider. First, you collect with your eyes, what really sort of appeal. Next, one collect with one's head. You collect with one's ears. Head is next. He is. How does that piece fit into the larger sort of narrative? Yeah. And that is talking to fellow collectors, talking to the artists themselves. I mean, a lot of what resulted in our whole collecting approach really is talking to the artists in terms of what they're trying to do. And then, then the whole idea of focusing, that was very sort of important for us and then next, what I call collecting with one's head. And that's read the catalogs, try to, in terms of, and then of course, the last thing was collecting with one's heart. And what has tried to determine our collecting over the years is, does the piece resonate? Is there an emotional, aesthetic sort of response to it? Now, occasionally, I would fall off the wagon and buy something for the sake of the collection, you know. But we have tried over the years, you know, to really, does the piece say to us, is it really sort of appealing? You know, can we really sort of, live with it? So. Mm-hmm. Well, you know, that's listen. Some people who have been on personal tours with me, I always tell people they have to pick out their three. You know, so early on, Gene and I, we would, every show that we would go to, we would pick out three pieces, and then we would discuss them, and we'd sort of figure out. What things really sort of resonated and stuff. But I don't know. Over time, I think I have a pretty good sense of the things that she's not, you know, and vice versa. But sometimes, we do have to buy for the collection, but you have a response to that. I don't know. Yeah. Yeah. I'm sorry. Collecting. There are. If one is collecting a particular style, say we have a small. We try to collect African American artists who do works in an abstract, style. So generally in that style you usually think Sam Gilliam, William T. Williams. Who's the third guy? I haven't seen them all. But anyway, so there are artists who work in that style, and all of to complete the collection, there might be an artist that I don't particularly like the work, but in order to have a representative collection, then I would do it. But I do that very rarely.
Another question? Yeah.
I see the Jacob Lawrence pieces, and I'm from Seattle, and I grew up with Jacob Lawrence pieces. He was a friend of the family. Jacob Lawrence's house is still in the central area of the Black community of Seattle. And some of my mother's friends have a nonprofit that they run to keep the house open, training center, and things of that nature. So one summer, not too long ago, I was there and attended one of those events at Jacob Lawrence's house. And going through his house to see the things that he collected was really, really quite interesting.
I bet there was a lot of tools there, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. The whole neighborhood, like so many things in the United States, the character of the neighborhood is changing. I mean, when the black folks moved in, it used to be kind of a Jewish neighborhood. But now many of the
Mm-hmm.
It helps to preserve his legacy, preserve his history.
Wow.
And he was quite a historian.
Yeah.
And that's reflected in his pieces of major pieces of African American history and the story.
Wow. That's a wonderful story.
Preservation
Wow.
Jacob's
Yeah.
place.
Yeah. You know, your comment, bring to mind another thing that was very sort of important to us over the years. You know, in terms of the Brandywine workshop, Lou Stovall workshop, Curly Holton sort of workshop. So those workshops, I have been involved with those workshops over 10 years. So in terms of the Jacob Lawrence, he he did a whole series of prints with Lou Stovall. So when Lou was working on a new print, you know, uh, and we had a little running from time to time. I would go. I said, okay, Lou, what you working on now? What's next? And how much money I had to put aside, Okay. But another thing that Gene and I did early on is that we said, we have a food budget, we have a mortgage, so we set aside, art purchasing budget. So, so by working and by that, uh, Lou didn't have a structure, but EPI Brandywine they had boards, so I sat on those boards. So some sense I had some sense of who the artist was coming, what they were going to be sort of doing, and then so that was the way that was another way that we helped that in terms of putting the collection together. So like for example, probably the last 4 or 5 or 6 prints that Lou did with Jacob Lawrence, you know, we in fact we have the very oh boy, we had the very last print that uh, that 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 Lawrence did, and that was so tragic because we had prayed for the print in the pre-public, and we heard that Lawrence had died, and we couldn't call up Lou and say, "Did he finish the print?" No. But so he was so ill that that print would have stained glass windows, builders, and he was so weak he couldn't write the whole thing out, so he just the initials. So that was another way that was another way that really sort of helped with with and if when Lou was working with Sam Gilliam, for example, I kind of knew what was coming, and so I was able to so but uh, here again, and this is one of the things that Catherine they were able to pick up in this particular sort of exhibition. One way one can support the artist. It came to my realization that if you support the workshops that in turn support the artist, that became very important for me. Because see what Jake Lawrence what Lawrence would do, what David Driscoll would do, what Faith Ringo would do, a lot of those prints were commissions that they did to support the NACP Defense Fund, the Children's Defense Fund. Someone mentioned that one of their favorite prints is Douglas that's in the exhibition. And Douglas was a print that was commissioned by the National Association of Black Journalists to support them. Jacob Lawrence did a very interesting thing, and after Jake had become reputationally, commercially, and financially successful, he came to the realization, well, what can I do to help the civil rights movement? And he realized that he could do these commissioned prints as a way of supporting these research organizations. And two of the friends, Catherine Love's husband, Charlie Cohan, was the master printer for To the Defense, which he did for the NACP